G'day legends, I hope you are having a fantastic day and so far you are having a brilliant week. Of course, legends, as always, we do have a lot to go over. We'll be looking at the maps, specifically in Pokrovsk, but also Siversk, where we have seen a break into that area. Of course, the big news of the day, though, is the peace proposal. US, Russia, Ukraine, in Turkey, what is actually being proposed? Now, what are negotiations when we're at time of war? Negotiations, at the end of the day, you won't pull a rabbit out of a hat. What negotiations will do is codify battlefield realities. So we'll talk about what is being proposed, how the battlefield influences this, what's been proposed before, and will Ukraine accept this, how this has come at the worst possible time for Ukraine. Of course, Zelensky's caught up in a huge corruption scandal. Ukraine need next year, there's no confirmed funding. They need in the tens to upwards of into nearly $100 billion. Huge corruption scandal at the moment with friends, business partners, people within his then party. And all of this revolves around the golden toilet. And I've thought about how much money do you need to embezzle before you go, I've got the Lambo, I've got the Ferrari, I've got this, I'm buying a golden toilet. How much money have you embezzled before you get to that point? And just the symbology of a golden toilet, like you've literally shat on the taxpayers, shat on the people fighting for you, shat on all your citizens, and then you flee to then Israel. Of course you do. Of course, legends, yesterday I had a very big day myself. It was the results after the 12 months of chemotherapy. I'll put the results up here, but realistically from the neurosurgeon, she said that there's no measurable growth and it's looking, quote, perfectly stable. Of course, this is while still undergoing active treatment. I have another scan in 4 months and that will be, of course, not on any treatment. That will give us a better idea. Of course, what we'd like to see is reduction in size of the tumour. Maybe that could open up a surgical option. Of course, it hasn't done this, but even if it did that and they could then cut it out, tumours like this, they tend to grow back and grow back worse. As I explained at length yesterday, what we're really trying to do with this is just extend my life so better treatments or better techniques become available to treat this the best that we can. But thank you for all of your support. Yesterday's video, if you want an at length of all of that update, but thank you for being with me over a difficult year. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is we'll talk about Severodonetsk and then we'll talk about this peace plan. Then I'll catch you up on all of the maps. So, of course, here's Ukraine, center of your screen, the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22, purple since 2014. And we come into this small envelopment here. When I mean small, it's very wide, but therefore it's not that deep. Something like this is a larger envelopment as far as how dangerous it is in tactical terms. But Siversk, we know this area has been really behind on the maps, especially through Yampil, especially in Liman, and especially in Minka as well. It likely looks a lot more closed up than this, but Siversk itself not even shown in grey. Russian command, they have spoken about how good the Ukrainian defence has been around here for a matter of years, but now we have, over the past weeks, past months, have really been seeing this shift. And the geolocations today, well, geolocations don't lie. So we see in Seversk actual, just to the southeastern side, in this geolocation here, a Ukrainian drone targeting Russians inside of this building. Newer geolocation again though, straight from Kremny Caprice, shows Russians on this road and then further north, basically into the centre of Seversk, an area that has been a real frontline fortress for a long time. Now we see troops then multiple times throughout it. So this is an area we had been warning of. And of course, this goes all the way out to Liman, Stavki, Yorova, which will develop into the northern flank for Sloviansk, Kramatorsk. And this movement into here, if you'd like to know the tactics behind the DRGs, the artillery, the drones, go and just click on my profile. The main video, I think it should pop up, is how this is being done again and again and again, building on those flanks and then operationally encircling. We can see a little bit of red here through Yampil, Dronivkia. Let's have a look at the Syriac map side here. So building on that southern edge and, of course, on that northeastern side, continuing to make significant ground shown, at least by the Syriac map. In his newer update, showing further movement into the center of Seversk as per the geolocations that we are seeing. So, of course, there's been peace proposals, negotiations before. And as we know, the more numbers you have, the better it is. Whether it's the 10-point peace plan, the 5-point victory plan, the 5-point peace plan, now we've got like the 28-point plan. So again, at the end of the day, there's this war, in my opinion, and many others, is going to be fought to the conclusion that the intractable gulf between where the states are sitting, what the battlefield is actually showing, the reality of this. A whole bunch of people want a peace not based on the reality of the battlefield. And what I say is, it's not really how war works. Whether it is Mumfufu banging the next tribe on the head with a stick, all the way through to 21st century war with drones. At the end of the day, from that example to this example is then politics by the means. But let's actually have a look at what has happened. And of course, could not come at a worse time. Financial Times, they report US and Russian officials draft new peace plan for Ukraine, a sweeping new proposals to end Russia's war in Ukraine that envisions major concessions from Kyiv and urged President Volodymyr Zelensky to accept. So saying, we want you to accept this. It was conveyed to Kyiv by, of course, the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Of course, 28 points to then Rustem Umerov. According to people with direct knowledge of the document, the draft plan would require Ukraine to cede the remainder of the eastern Donbass region, including land currently under Kyiv's control, and cut the size of its armed forces by half. Now, regardless of how this war ends, Ukraine will have half the size of its armed forces anyway. There's no way in the world they can maintain at 30% GDP this size of armed forces. Not unless there's massive amounts of further European money going in, but seizing that land in the Donbass. Again, what we're not hearing about is other ground, Kherson, Zap, as well. So there's other areas that have been entered. Crucially, it calls for Ukraine to abandon key categories of weaponry, would include the rollback of US assistance that has been vital to its defense. So weapons that can strike further, a lot of offensive systems, potentially leaving the country vulnerable to future Russian aggression. It would also stipulate that Russian be recognised as an official state language in Ukraine and grant official status to the local branch of the Russian Orthodox Church. The person familiar with the document described it as a very generic document that was heavily tilted towards Russia. Why? Because Russia, by all metrics, is winning on the battlefield at the moment. And as I said, war negotiations, ultimately they codify the reality of the battlefield. We see it's moving in the wrong direction for Ukraine. Ukraine has manpower, severe crises, funding crises, you name it, it's there. Crises in the government, again, is it going to be tilted that way? Yes. This is exactly the plan of trying to get Russia on the back foot so it can be heavily tilted towards Ukraine. This works both ways. And that pendulum of whether Trump is then Kyiv's best friend or Putin's secret agent, that pendulum, we see it swing every couple of weeks. No one can get an idea on where they sit in this. There's that up and down that is our guy, not our guy, our guy, not our guy. Let's further go through on Axios here. A US official has said that Ukraine is likely to lose the territory anyway if the war continues, and therefore it is in Ukraine's interest to reach a deal now. So saying, you're going to lose this anyway, you can either do it through a negotiated process or it'll be done by force. They say a friction point. As part of the Turkish support for Trump's peace initiative, Witkoff planned to visit Ankara on Wednesday and hold a trilateral meeting with Zelensky and Turkish foreign minister. The US official claimed the meeting was postponed when it became clear that Zelensky was walking back from the understandings reached with Umerov and is not interested in discussing the Trump plan. I'm hearing this more and more, saying that no, Zelensky, Ukraine, they're turning all of this down. Again, as I've said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It's important, even if Ukraine ultimately says no to it, to still look like, especially the Americans, that they're somewhat involved. We'll go over why. Zelensky, instead, was travelling to Ankara with another plan drafted with European partners, which Russia will never accept. Yes, Zelensky and the European partners, they're going to come with, we need $1 trillion from Russia for reparations, we need this, we need pullback of that. That plan is not the reality of the battlefield or of war in general. If we go down the path of reparations, which I'll support, let's go down the path of reparations, see how that fares for the European partners and the US and many other states. A Ukrainian official said the meetings was postponed because Zelensky asked to discuss the plan in broader format with then the European partners. A second US official said a domestic political scandal in Ukraine involving corruption investigations against some of Zelensky's closest advisors was another reason for postponing the meeting. This is a disaster. We'll go over it in a sec. The official said that Trump authorised Witkoff to try and reach a deal with Zelensky in Turkey. What's next? We are now going to wait. The ball is in Zelensky's court. So saying that us and the Russians have come to something that we see as acceptable, it's now in Zelensky's court. It's up to him. Now, this is where I think this is a very pivotal moment for Ukraine. Officials in Kyiv briefed on the plan said it was closely aligned with the Kremlin's maximalist demands. Now, this term, maximalist demands, now, it gets thrown around. I've used it myself, but I don't think this accurately represents the situation currently. Now, if NATO themselves are saying it's all good, guys, 6 months until Russia's in Zaporizhia, maximalist demands would be then saying we want everything of the Dnieper River. It would be a demand of which doesn't look achievable militarily. Does taking Eastern Donbass area achievable? Yeah, it does look militarily achievable that Russia could do that. I'm not saying it's a minimalist demand, but I don't think it is at this point, by definition, a maximalist demand. Russia's demands have been incredibly consistent, even as the war has shifted from sometimes less favourable to more favourable. It has been pretty consistent in the demand. Now, all of this, of course, comes at the worst possible time. As I said earlier, there's no confirmed funding for next year. We know there's tens of billions of euros or dollars, whatever you want, short. And Zelensky's government is caught in the largest corruption scandal since he took office. Not only corruption, but attempts to hide it with a long-term business partner being tipped off and fleeing. All of this corruption, this hiding, all this is not maybe the greatest moment in time to be asking the European Union in a couple of short months to be putting their entire currencies at risk to the sound of tens or hundreds of billions of euros for further funding. We see this. Trump plan asks Ukraine to cede additional territory. Now, in my opinion, Trump has a lot going on at home. I think this could be the final US attempt to bring this war to some sort of closure. Like, this is what it is, otherwise we're walking away. For Washington, for Trump, there are far larger and far more immediate priorities at home, ones that genuinely have the capacity to alter the trajectory of the American empire. Trump, he's trying to fight to stabilize the administration and his following somewhat, most of which have jumped ship by now. Who would have thought going to this island with your best mates is not that popular? But in the recent weeks, all these allegations, all of this, it brings the entire US system into the spotlight. And all of this, of course, unfolds against the backdrop of China's rise and how one of the only ways to really push this down is actually reopening ties with Russia. All of this has far heavier strategic pressure than what is happening in Ukraine and maybe an unfair deal. I think Trump's priority is to try and save what looks like a dying empire more so than trying to save the Donbass. And I think this is like it could be the final take it or leave it. Big Surge, he tweets, the war we fought to its military conclusion. Please Google Big Surge, or Surge as I've said here, but fighting to the conclusion. He spoke about this several months ago. It's still one of the best articles I've read on this on his Substack. Oliver Carroll, he talks about 2.5 times reduction. Again, that military is not going to stay at those numbers even if the fighting stops. No foreign troops, no foreign diplomatic planes in Ukraine, ban on long-range weapons that can reach then to St. Petersburg or Moscow. Again, fairly broad brushstroke stuff that we would expect to see in it. There's nothing new in this, as well that it may leave room open for Ukraine to join the EU. Again, I can't see where Moscow would see that being a problem. As people have said, if you really want to impact economies, join the EU. But of course, this all comes with this huge corruption scandal. Now, this article here from The Guardian, that unnamed officials told media that Kyiv's government could be brought down should Mr. Zelensky fail to remove Mr. Yermak. And we've reported before on Yermak that no one apparently can see Zelensky, talk to Zelensky, make a decision without going through his chief of staff, Yermak. There was a lot of rumours last week that he was fleeing too. Timur Mindich, a close personal associate and business partner of Zelensky. He fled the country hours before they arrived at his home. That he was tipped off before this happened. Of course, they have been in business from pre-presidency. He fled to Israel. He's Ukrainian-Israeli. Detectives found a golden toilet bowl in his bathroom, an excruciating image of excess that has received significant backlash. Literally shitting in the face of all those fighting, all those suffering, and all those supporting as well. Again, like I said, how much would you have to embezzle before you start going, yeah, let's have this, with the bidet to match? People go, well, Russia's just as corrupt. Yeah, likely. But my tax money is not buying golden toilets. My politicians aren't saying that we must send billions and billions more and that this state over here is the perfect example of a thriving democracy at this point. Mr. Mindich is the co-owner of Kvartal 95, the media production Mr. Zelensky founded, and the pair have been friends since before Mr. Zelensky entered politics. So your own media company, named, of course, in the Pandora Papers for embezzling money into shell companies in low tax zones as well. Justice Minister and Energy Minister, they resigned. They're saying they have no wrongdoings. People are saying Mr. Yermak that he should be next. Lawmaker from the opposition party told Politico that even MPs from Zelensky's own party suspect that Mr. Yermak was linked to the corruption plot. Pressure on Yermak has been mounting since the summer. He was accused of being at the heart of efforts to strip the anti-corruption agencies of their power in Ukraine. This is what we saw. Remember that a couple of months back that trying to strip these powers away from these agencies. Next thing we see the biggest scandal pop up. I'm sure they're not related at all. But this all comes with huge problems. And Jimmy Rushton, he talks about this. He's a Kyiv-based foreign policy and security analyst. This is about, of course, Yermak and this gentleman here saying his chief of staff, national security advisor, and de facto prime minister all rolled into one, that he must be fired. And he's saying, when I've been speaking to Ukrainians, both in the military and civilians, over the past couple of days, Yermak is one of the two people they overwhelmingly want to see replaced. The other is Commander-in-Chief Siversk. Now, I cannot believe that Siversk has stayed in his position this long. Even before he was in that position, he had a terrible rep amongst the soldiers. Why is he still here? Likely because he poses zero political threats to Zelensky or Yermak, unlike how Zaluzny did and how Budanov may as well. Now, at the end of the day, we speak about manpower crises, and the diplomat is ultimately the servant of the warrior. Are you surprised that with golden toilets, decisions made, all of this, that there's now a manpower crisis? Now, Zelensky, several hours ago, he had a speech regarding somewhat around this peace plan. Nothing is that clear, still pretty opaque. A dignified peace and guaranteed security. The war must end. There is no alternative to peace. Russia must understand there can be no reward for war and killings. Russia must not be left with the opportunity to start another similar war against Ukraine or any other country in this region. Guaranteed security, we have said before and heard before, that NATO is their only guarantee. That's all that Ukraine has pushed on. And ultimately, the real linchpin for this war. But as we have seen, as the goalposts have shifted again and again and again, now you hear about dignified peace, not 1991 borders and victory and all of this. So the goalposts, they are definitely shifting. But Zelensky and the Europeans, they are expecting to come with a new proposal in whatever number of point peace plan, victory plan, with the expectation that Russia, they will capitulate, Putin will be arrested, fully withdraw, and pay reparations as well. Now, again, negotiations, they ratify, codify the battlefield. This is why I believe none of this will work. And this is somewhat why I think Putin is laying a bit of a poison pill, that Putin knows Zelensky could not survive accepting this, but that it may look reasonable to the US, therefore saying the ball's in Zelensky's court, that we over here, if you're the US, we've come to something that looks reasonable, and now it's in your court and you're not accepting it, therefore poison pill, pull support away. Now, there's a common fallacy that war doesn't pay. A lot of this is looking at 20th century wars, but history has shown war, a lot of the time, if you are successful, has huge benefits following them. Not justifying any war, but the idea that no war is ever has a upside, either economically, politically gaining ground, that's not really a fact when we look at history. Although war, of course, has huge suffering and huge loss and a huge gamble. Now, a massive another kick in the nuts with a golden shoe is Reuters reporting that Keith Kellogg will step down in January 26. They don't even know if he'll be replaced at all. Special representative with the President of the United States to Ukraine has announced he's going to step down. Now, we criticised Kellogg a lot. A lot of the time he was living in fantasy land drinking the Kool-Aid. And he was on a very different outlook from the rest of his administration. But within the US administration, within Trump's administration, he was the most powerful supporter for Ukraine with real power. And he's going. Again, a lot of this is coming at the worst possible time. Not only is the battlefield speeding up, large areas like Pokrovsk that are then enveloped, the south is collapsing, Siversk is on the move. These areas, massive corruption scandals, lack of funding, politicians all caught up in all sorts of shit, Kellogg pulling out, Trump wanting an end, Trump trying to save his own empire at home. The next few weeks might be very spicy. And like many are saying, this is likely going to be the best negotiation put forward. People are upset the negotiations at some point, what is proposed, like it's worse than it was in 2022. Yeah, like are we shocked by that? Anyway, let's have a look at the maps. Let's come down into Pokrovsk. Now, yesterday, what we can see is more ground made to the north, northeast around Minograd, more ground being made Volodymyr and Sofivka. Again, from Ukrainian sources today, Sharkovka has a number of Russian forces in here as well. We looked at that southern region, so then we're going to pop up to then today. We'll turn on the red check, no ground being made around Pokrovsk. We'll look at the other ones in a second. But what I've been speaking about is this pocket in here with limited, if any, movement in and out, operationally encircled, operationally enveloped, vertically enveloped. This is a catastrophic situation in here. Now, many maps like this are showing where the front line is here. This is just not the case with all of the geolocations that we've got. There's another map everyone's throwing around with the control way back here somewhere. The map's bullshit. But in Minograd, and this is what we speak about, of this holding in place with forces and drones and then heavier weapons to destroy, we see at this geolocation just here more, and this is all day, every day, more weapons like Fab 3000s being dropped in these sectors. You can just get an idea of the size of a system like this, but also like this overpressure shockwave, the damage that it can do to people well outside of its initial blast radius as well, even down to psychological impact. And these areas in here, the only areas left under control, is becoming an absolute nightmare from already a catastrophic situation. Let's have a look. We see more ground being made through the southern areas of Minograd. You know what we saw the other day? Why I'm showing you that Fab footage is this is where we saw all those Fabs drop the other day. According to Syriac, now the Russians have swept through there. Ground on the northern area of Minograd being made as well. Of course, this pincer here, a little bit of ground being made on the western side. We'll ignore that for now. Come to his newer Pokrovsk, and this is what's getting developed here. Military Summary Channel, he spoke further about this too. Remember, we saw Russians right out to these pig farms in here, and how building on the northern sector of Pokrovsk, southern sector of Rodantske, it's gone from a pinch to like a tunnel movement in and out, as the center of Minograd, by things like Fabs or drones, is just getting absolutely shattered. Let's look onto the northern side, where this, of course, has been pushing back that Russian advance we saw, and just a little bit of clarification in Grozny that Russia control some area into here, at least from Mr. Syriac maps. Let's move across to Konstantinivka, Shkabianka coming under some control in here, in my opinion, from Yambanivka to Pleshkivka. All this grey is under Russian control at this point in time. Most maps and geolocations tend to suggest this. Let's have a look here. Just a little bit of ground being made. Ivanopilia, which other maps are showing movement here too. Of course, building into Konstantinivka, we do see occasionally some DRGs breaking into sectors like this. Move our way into the south. Of course, what was the Velika front, but now we see Novopavlivka, that mechanised assault that did drop off soldiers in here. The only successful mech assault we've seen in a long time. We see, according to Suryak, continual exploitation of this as well. So building up your forces and exploiting through Novopavlivska as well. And this is interesting because this is vastly different to what we had seen. Of course, what we had seen previously was we'd look at going, oh, Russia will build through Marovka, build through Ivanivka, work on the flanks, and then collapse Novopavlivka. Of course, that's how from Mariupol to Avdiivka to Bakhmut to Pokrovsk, they're taking areas. What we've seen in here is a mech assault, seemingly successful, straight up the guts. Of course, using fog, but again, all's fair in love and war. And using the fog, well, that's what you do. It's tactics, it's strategy. Could we see a reintroduction of manoeuvre? I don't think that is the indicator of it, but keep an eye out. Let's move our way down. We have, of course, what I can't pronounce, but the Huliapol front, Zeleny Hay. This lines up pretty close with the geolocation that we saw, but of course, building on this Severodonetsk Hay pocket, bypassing a lot of the fortifications down in this sector. Let's have a look. Now, again, we can see Masiole, we see Huliapol, where this is building. Again, this is looking more similar to what we would expect in a non-maneuver war, where it is blocks of grinding forwards. You can see how this is going and also looking like it will just then bypass where Huliapol is. We know AMK showed right out to this reservoir here. Suryak is similar. It might just bypass and absorb on the way. But this is a very important area. Of course, Orokhiv, very important as well. Now, the Velika front, of course, we've got a few different axes in here. Oleksivkia, Ostapivske, Vidrany front areas where there's a lot of grey zone being shown. Why? Well, one, this front line is very porous. Two, because the kilometre squares month to month is used in informational warfare as well. On this front, they continued advancing along the Vovcha River between Novoselivska and Olestrapil as well. So these not that great to line up, but Oleksivkia, Olestrapil, these sectors right up in here, making ground between these areas as well. So Novoselivska front, so building this whole sector deeper into Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Second update in here, Russia began to advance into Nechaevka. So what we'll look for is this main road heading through here. That's where they have then broken through into. This is Nechaevka in here. So you can see vastly different from what this is showing. But again, it's not surprising to see from here to here forces 7.6 kilometres away as this accelerates here. But we do know then this map can be wrong by a number of kilometres from even geolocations. This is at least 6 kilometres different here. So am I to believe it? Well, it doesn't meet my threshold. But do I think it's likely? Yeah, I think it is more likely than not. And of course, even maps like this caught up in a lot of informational sphere when we see problems in politics, problems on the front line, problems in negotiations, the remaining areas of control will try and clamp down on that. Do not be surprised to see highly active bots, highly angry accounts in the next couple of days and weeks trying to piece together the scraps of narrative that are left. Now, let's come up into the north of the country. We have a fair bit to look at up here. So Kupiansk sector and the Pashani Pavlivka area, we see this is the pocket down in here. I believe this is this area in here, Pishani. You can sort of see where these tree lines are. So Ukraine making some ground in here. But then in the northern area up in here, this grey zone, of course, has expanded. Russia making more ground in the direction of Dorachne as well. And then Vovchansk. Now, this is interesting to look at Vovchansk because this is where we have heard weeks ago Russia's not having success in the middle because it's just so destroyed. You can't gain anywhere. They'll just try and bypass it. But again, we've spoken about the Donetsk River down in here, right down, that runs basically all the way to Kupiansk. This whole sector could be under a large threat of actually coming under control very quickly. It's hard to defend. How does that go in negotiations? What happens to the other areas in negotiation? Anyway, let's have a look in here as Suryak he has 3 updates looking at this. So movement west-east in Vovchansk, actual within the city itself. The best way to look at is where this railway loops around. It's just in this sector, so sweeping through. We see railway on the western side of here to Tishelne, excuse my pronunciation, but into Tishelne right in here, building further ground. And then the final map for this area, further exploitation down the railway and further sweeping through Vovchansk itself. Interesting to see this area coming back under then further assault actions. So last map update we looked at yesterday, some movement down around Yampil. If it will load, this should be under red check. Just this sector here dicking out. We'll have a look at our Liman map here. Now, situation North Donetsk, the Liman fronts continue advancing in the forest west, in the area west of Yampil, taking over control of new trenches. So these aren't the greatest to line up, but we can have a look at where Liman is, this road heading down in this sector, and how all this is coming under red. Basically what the grey is showing on this. And if you look at the grey zone is growing and growing and growing. Pokrovsk, southern front, Liman, northern front. Again, we'll get a better idea of kilometre squares once things start catching up. Again, a war of attrition like this is to influence the potential of the state, not gain or lose territory, at least as the priority. But by those metrics, by any of those metrics, we can see why the negotiations may be then somewhat tilted in someone or the other's favour. It's going to be a very difficult process. What do I believe is going to happen? If you ask me right now, Ukraine will not be interested in hearing out any of these proposals, neither will Europe. Europe have no interest in a decent resolution to this. They only have interest in reducing Russia's potential power. And their interest is at whoever is left in here to continue fighting on their behalf without sending in all the systems that they could or any of their own forces. The US is in shambles at the moment, and that this is not going to collapse or save America in here, that they'll go, look, we can't deal with this any longer. We've laid out this and we are walking away. Trump, say what you will about him, but he does talk about this out of the deal, know when to walk away. If he's tried for the best part of a year and nothing's moving and he sees one side is reasonable and one is not reasonable, we could see Trump walk away when he goes, I have my hands full with other stuff at the moment. With Bubba. Legends, you have a fantastic day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.